and we need to start asking questions about the responsibility of third parties and digital service providers or other parts of our regular economy, which are being hijacked to scale up human trafficking practices. Additionally, our own way of working needs to be updated constantly. And in this regard, the last big update to our services only dates from October 2022, with more practices on the way. End of last year, we launched the Praatmobiel, or Babbelbus, as some are starting to call it, which appears to be a normal van on the outside, but houses a mobile and cozy counseling room on the inside. The project came into being because we noticed not every location where we needed to talk with victims had the proper facilities, especially schools that were constructed in the 1970s, of which there are plenty in our region. Yeah, they used a lot of glass. And on top of that, not every part of the region has the same level of infrastructure in general. By making our team hypermobile, we've ensured that we're able to bring a privacy and safety to wherever the victim needs it, and it's something we're very proud about. Now, I believe I've already spoken too much, and I don't want to take away any time from the wonderful experts we have for you today. So let's just get things going. Silvia, who is our head of programs and part of that wonderful team I told you about, will take it from here. Silvia, the floor is yours, and thanks for organizing this event.
Thank you, Anton. Thank you for introducing Payoke. Thank you for introducing me and Yade, who will co-host this event with me today. You were right, we had was a successful initiative so far. We had more than 200 participants registered, and I counted over 10 member states participating and the UK. So that demonstrates the high interest that there is around this topic. Before kicking things off with our first panelist, I will just give you some quick, a quick description of what LILA is about. It is, as Anton said, an EU-funded project under the Serba Daphne 2021, with an aim to, it was designed after the pandemic, looking into the needs of survivors of gender-based violence in the needs that arose from the health crisis. To date, we have developed guidelines to pilot a comprehensive assistance model that we're currently implementing in the 4 participating countries. If you want to know more about the project, you're invited to visit our website, the LILA website, or the website of the partner country. Now, before I pass the floor to Steve and Audrey, I have some practical information to share. So because this is a webinar format, your camera and microphone are not activated. So that means that for the questions, you will have to type that into either the chat or you can use the Q&A button. The speakers will take your questions after the presentation. If there is not enough time to answer all the questions, they agreed to stay a little longer to reply to you in writing. And of course, feel free to come back to us after the event if you want to discuss things further or you have more questions for our speakers. You can contact us through our email or social media. As you've seen, the presentations are recorded. They will be post-produced by ABD, and they will be saved as training material on the LILA website and on our social media. Following this event, you will receive a questionnaire. As you know, this kind of post-event surveys are very important for organizations for monitoring and evaluation purposes. So we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to fill them out. Together with the questionnaire, we will also send you the slides from the presentations that you will hear today. And finally, I would like to remind you that this is the first of a series of 6 training online capacity building events. So go back to the LILA website or our social media to see the full list, and they're happening between now and the end of March. Now, coming to our first session, our panelists are Steve Gorelashvili and Audrey Bock, psychosocial counselors from Payoke's Loverboy teenage pimp trafficking. Introducing Steve. Prior to joining Payoke, Steve worked in specialized youth care, academic research, and law enforcement in Montreal, Washington, D.C., Maine, Brussels, and Antwerp. He holds a bachelor's degree in social work and a master's degree in criminology and victimology. As for Audrey, she previously worked as a youth coach, focused on preventing school dropouts, as a body coach, matching volunteers with underprivileged youth, and as a psychophysical resilience trainer. Audrey has a degree in orthopedagogy, specializing in juvenile criminology. Both Audrey and Steve are certified trainers for Rock and Water, a body-based program providing young people a pathway to increase the self-awareness, self-confidence, and resilience. Guys, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Silvia and Anton also. We are gonna start with the PowerPoint, and we're gonna start with Audrey, who's gonna start with the first part. I will take over afterwards. And as Silvia already mentioned, feel free to ask questions. And if we don't have enough time, of course, there's a possibility that either through email we are available, or we stay a little more longer in the chat. See if we can answer some questions there. And otherwise, you do have our contacts anyway, so that shouldn't be a problem. Let me share my screen. It's yeah. Begin. Right, and the camera out. Just I'm gonna turn off the camera for now. All right, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. I will start off with telling what Payoke does, what our vision, our mission, and our objectives are. You can easily follow everything on the slides, and if it goes too fast or you have questions, there will be plenty of time for Q&A afterwards. So first off, what is Payoke? Payoke is a non-governmental organization that fights against the trading, exploitation, and modern slavery of human beings. We offer specialized care and support to our victims in their recovery and guide them back to full independency. We fight human trafficking in all its forms, and of course, we work for justice to be done. Our mission is to provide care and protection for all victims of trafficking, which means we offer one-on-one psychosocial guidance, if necessary, safe houses, legal support, and much more. Our vision, of course, is a world without slavery, where everyone has the right and the opportunities to build a dignified life for themselves. Then our objectives are to reintegrate the victims as full-fledged individuals in our society, or if they want to, the society of their origin. We know that every victim is different and unique, so we offer very personal, tailor-made psychosocial support, and often involve external partners if we feel that it's needed. We want to bring offenders to justice, nationally and internationally, this in the cooperation with victims and with the help of law enforcement and justice. We also want to raise awareness about human trafficking in all its manifestations across all sectors of our society, also nationally and internationally. This we try to do through media and campaigns. I don't know if you heard about it, but a good example is the Blue Heart campaign. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is modern slavery. It's the exploitation of one human by a second for their gain and profit. This by recruitment, transportation, transfer, or harboring of people. It is done through force, but also fraud or deception. For an example, when teen pimps seduce a young woman and then force them into prostitution or other illegal activities. Men, women, and other children of all ages and from all backgrounds can become victims of these crimes, which of course occurs around every region of the world. Payoke has 3 departments to assist these victims. Saralek, which consists for around 30 years. LBTP teams for victims of teen pimps, which is existing for 5 years, and the project department.
All right. This was for the introduction of Payoke. We will now continue to, let me put on the camera. Can I put on the camera anymore? Oh, yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna try and put on the camera again. And here it is. All right, now we will further connect the gender dimension of Loverboy trafficking to Payoke and Lila. So feel free to take some notes for anything that is unclear and to ask questions. I see there's already some questions going on in the chat. Thank you for that. And we will pick that up later. We will start by talking about gender-based violence. We use a definition according to the Council of Europe. And this, according to the Council of Europe, the GBV, gender-based violence, refers to any harmful act that is perpetrated against an individual based on their gender identity, their gender expression, or their perceived gender. This can include physical, also sexual, psychological, or economic abuse. And gender-based violence can affect any people of all genders, but is predominantly experienced by women and girls, and often goes unreported and unaddressed. Most of the clients that we see, we will often talk out of field practice, me and Audrey here, because we exist, as you saw in the previous slides, already 5 years. So we do have scientific basis, but we also have some field experience, and we will refer to that often. So the clientele that comes to us are often involved either in criminal activities or coerced prostitutions. Now, I have to put an exclamation on the criminal activities part. This is also forced. We will clarify further in the presentation on that. The criminal activities that we encounter are usually burglary, scamming, and drug dealing. And the coerced prostitutions, as well as the criminal activities that happens to the boys as well as the girls. However, we do receive more reports on girls that come through us. That is, there are multiple explanations for that. One part is that organizations report to us and we cannot find the clients themselves. And it is a more clear view of when prostitution is in place, especially with minors, that people are worried, and then they contact Payoke to clarify things. The boys who are reported for sexual activities, in our experience for now, they do find them often in the gay community. Now, there is a challenge in identifying victims. We could call it profiling that people often ask for, which is a difficult term, the profiling. In criminology, they use it often in justice departments for perpetrators. And often lay people like to know what a victim, a typical victim looks like. Could be for different reasons, either for themselves to reassure themselves that they and their children are safe, or it could be just to trying to understand something that is very difficult to understand. It's a very difficult process when a person becomes a victim of human trafficking. To make it clear, one identification, one profile for victims, it does not exist. That's to be clear. We often find in sensibilization campaigns that a victim is portrayed as a traumatized or a weak or a lonely, frail girl that is seduced by a guy. But in reality, we encounter the exact opposite also. We encounter foul-mouthed girls, loud girls, very expressive. They look very independent. They look very popular. Even they also are victims, which is the opposite of what the campaigns often portray. Now, to conclude, there are many profiles, and the strength, to call it that way, of teen pimps is to adapt to the need of a certain profile. However, we do know and we do find that some people are more vulnerable than others for certain approaches of teenage pimps. Lover boys, they are specialized in finding the right approach for the right person. Whether there is a need for more affection for one person, is there a need for more materialistic things such as clothing, jewelry, accessories versus, or a substance-related approach? Is there an addiction in place, preferable drugs, or combination of all the previous is often the case. That's why I said more often than not, combination seems the right approach. Now, the ages we come across, they are between 12 and 24 years old often. Now, 12 it's a rare occasion. Often it's 14, 16, 17, and then 18, 21, and then it doesn't stop, of course. Then it's become more unclear if it's voluntary prostitution or if there is a pimp or a human trafficker inside. Now, as for their backgrounds, they are of all social economical classes. And we also see all different kinds of ethnicity and also all different kinds of religion. However, we do notice a higher vulnerability in victimization to those who encounter challenges such as neglect, shame, abuse or sexual abuse, physical abuse, loneliness, poverty, homelessness, emotional behavioral disorders, autism, mental disability, drugs and alcohol dependency or addiction. Now, of course, each of the previous often has an underlying cause, and the combination of these factors also provides a much higher vulnerability rate. And to be clear, a lover boy victim, they are victims of human trafficking. And when does human trafficking occurs? That is when certain conditions are met. There are two aspects that are very important. We will talk about it in the next slide. So the aspect of the control part and the exploitation part.
Steve, let me interrupt you. Okay. We see the slides. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. So we have 5 types of exploitation when we talk about human trafficking. I will not go in depth on all of them because a lot of them also have to do with that are more occurring with adults. So as you see on the slide, economic exploitations, organ harvesting, it's not frequent in Belgium. Coerced begging, we notice that it is present, but they go underreported. For us, Loverboy Teenage Pimp team, we usually focus on sexual exploitation and coerced criminal activities. And the facts that we encounter are usually drug dealing, burglary, and scams. That means drug dealing, burglary, and scamming, that the victims, they do it on individual basis, but they are forced to do it. So the profits are not entirely for them. Even if they get something out of it, there is a baseline where we can say, okay, these people are exploited, even they're doing criminal facts, but they are still victims. And how do we see, how does the district attorney can see if somebody is a victim or is it voluntary or not? There are two forms of control. First of all, there's the internal form of control. That's through either a bond or an affection. Could be a family bond, could be an affection of love. And external is through the use of force, when they use either violence, extortion, threats, not necessarily to the people themselves, but to their younger sister, brother, family member, blackmail, and which we often see is a specific form of extortion, namely sextortion, where they have images, private images, they use for further exploitation. Now, the teenage boys, as I mentioned, when they're involved, they are often from the LGBTQI+ community when they are involved in sexual exploitation. And when they are not, we also see that the boys are often more dealing in drugs, or rarely burglary, but scams is pretty prevalent. The environment where minors are victim of human trafficking also do differ a lot. So we have two dimensions. One are less visible for us, which are pedophile networks, where adults intentionally seek minors. We hardly encounter this type. It's very underground. These are very covert in online networks on the dark web, where one does not usually find access. Perpetrators need to work themselves in by committing criminal acts themselves, such as providing images, videos to gain further access into that community. But we do encounter pimps that look for clients for their victims, and they offer a place of work for their victims, either at their home, in hotels, but often also through booking.com, Airbnb places. And that is how we encounter, these are the victims that we encounter, and they talk about how the practice goes on. How do the victims come to us? I already mentioned a small part. Usually they come to us either through the youth church, youth institutions, schools, parents, counselors, but also parents. Anyone that works with minors basically can contact us. Occasionally, we do have victims themselves that contact us, which unfortunately is not very often. We would like to see that happening more. Let me see, if we talk about what those clients need in sort of assistance, we do have some scientific literature for that. And we also, of course, we talk a lot with our clients about their needs and their assistance, what helps with teenage sex workers / victims of loverboys. It's a very thin line, because often teenage sex workers think they do their work voluntarily, but when there is somebody providing them workplace, customers, asking for a commission, demanding a commission, or they're receiving certain benefits for it, it becomes very blurry when they consider themselves a victim or not. So the general needs and assistance in general, we do come across is that's important that there is a good relationship between a client and a caregiver. Of course, that's in any caregiver-client relationship, but we see that with our clients that is a very important part. Also, the help that we provide, we often talk about our own frame of reference, about our own society, the needs of society and the demands of society. But the client is not always motivated there. And so initially, it's very important to find a strong connection with the motivation of the client, or they're already gone mentally in the connection between the caregiver. When interventions are put in place, it needs to be in tune with the issue and the personal needs of the client. Often this is conflicting with what society demands, what institutions demand, or what funding of certain institution demands from that institution. So it's a difficult path, but these are the things that do work when we find some creativity to work around it. The intervention should be well structured, so setting clear goals and with a phased planning. The implementation of the intervention should be as it was planned. Often it takes its own course, but it's very important to reflect on the start, middle, end to see that that it stays on track, that it doesn't divert too much. Then there's also a need for sufficient professionalism. And of course, we don't mean about the professionalism of the caregiver. They all studied for what they do as work, but we mean specific training regarding trauma. It doesn't need to be a therapist's education, but a few days of formation should be enough. We also will talk about later on the Rock and Water program, which is a Dutch organization that is well known worldwide for specific target groups. And as a final, very important part, which I mean, I'm sure all of you will concur with this, good working conditions for the caregiver is very important. And that means the caseload shouldn't be too heavy, and they should be supported, and they should feel safe, either not only on the work floor, but also with their clientele. There are also some specific needs and assistance for our typical clientele, and that is learning social and critical thinking skills. In accordance to that, adaptive behavioral or a cognitive behavioral approach seems to help. And then there's also the importance of involving family systems or expanding their social network. Now, you see there is an exclamation mark. It has a side note. There's a study from the Netherlands that showed regarding family systems involving them, 1 in 6 victims of human trafficking happens through family. So before involving the family, it's very important to see that a family is also a safe environment to work with. Also a lot of focus on the present, because if a therapist is in place, often the past will be handled, but we shouldn't focus too much on the past, more on the present, and from the present towards the future by, I will tell you here on the next part, to install an adequate day structure and leisure activities. Basically a routine and something to look forward to and predictability for the client. Another important part is to learn to recognize, not only recognize, but also to regulate emotions. We often see that when emotions go out of hand, first of all, they're not recognized immediately, they just go by feelings, not emotions. And as coping, often drugs and alcohol is the way to go to deal with emotions and feelings. So that is something that is very important to address. And of course, to reduce the dependency on drugs and alcohol. The victims themselves, they also mention a few things, and that is that they have a need to share their story with somebody who really listens to them. And that means an expert who understands trauma and the world they reside in. Not only the teenage world, their environment, but also the world of drugs and prostitutions. Because when they talk about it on a neutral basis with an adult, they don't feel judged. They notice the person also knows what they're talking about, but the world they reside in, they have a one-sided view, and they think, well, that is, they know better, But when a caregiver knows about that world and does not reside in that, they can give a neutral explanation without judging, without telling what is right, wrong. That helps the victims a lot. They also tell us that a need for somebody they can trust, that's what they have a lot of useful, it's very useful to them. But this takes time and it requires a personal approach. And with the caseload, I mentioned it previously, this is very, very difficult because we do see a lot of clients. And what they also mentioned, the clients, are that they have a need for somebody that takes them seriously and acknowledges them. That's also part of the first point that I mentioned here. It is their world, it is reality for them. And we often have our opinions and we know what is right and wrong, but that's not necessarily what they need. They need to be acknowledged, they need to be taken seriously. Also, what helps a lot when we ask ex-clients what helped them to step away, it's a form of displacement. Now, often this is put in a negative setting, for example, closed institutions. This helps, but it's not a very healthy environment because the closed institutions often have other problematic teenagers there, and they learn from each other. Ideally, they grow from the experience, but the main benefit is that they don't have access to a cell phone, social media, internet, and they are away for a few months from their previous world. However, in their development, if they don't have access to internet, phones, decent school, it's also in their development not necessarily a very positive thing. That's why we also advocate for another form of displacement. In Belgium, there is an organization that's been doing it for 30 years, France, Italy, the Netherlands, they all have these forms of displacements. These are either through walking tours, for example, from Belgium walking to Spain, Santiago de Compostela. This is walking for about 4 months, about 20-25 kilometers a day with one volunteer. It's not necessarily a counselor or a social educator, just a regular volunteer with regular life experience. And it's a one-on-one walking tour where they camp, they prepare their own food, and they walk all the way to Spain. Another form is a working project where they go to a certain, either a farm or a working environment in nature, where they can reside for 6 weeks to 4 months, with the possibility to extend it if they like it. So there's a lot to say about those displacements, a lot of good things, a lot of challenges they have. But this is what the victims mentioned that really helped them when stepping away from their previous experiences or life or PIMP. And then we will also talk about a little bit further about the Rock and Water program, which the victims mentioned they have a lot of benefits from. The next slide, I will talk about a short presentation about, let's see how much time I have. Okay, it's all right, we're on schedule. A guidance for practitioners. These are just some general tips and advice if you encounter such target group, what helped us and what seems to work. It's not always easy, that for sure. First of all, there's the importance of thinking outside of the box of the rules and the perceived, I mentioned the perceived limitations of the organization. Often caregivers think that there are certain limitations and fail to talk with the directors, with their team coordinator about possibilities and thinking outside of the box. It's an uncomfortable place to go to, and it offers a lot of problems in team dynamics, often in our organization. But this is really important with these kind of specific target groups. What can help is ask a specialized center for advice. Across Europe, there are specialized centers that work with these target groups. These centers, a center like ours, we go to the organizations, we give a formation, we talk about our work, what we can do, and we also give this advice. But this advice could be a starting point to get permission from the board of directors. to come up with creative approaches, because you can refer to that specialized center. Another part is to contact specialized police officers from the departments, youth departments in this case, human trafficking, but also the police that works on youth themselves. You can always ask them for advice, tips, and that depends on country and from region, but a good contact is very important. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the information should be given, and we can talk about that later. But you don't usually, the confidentiality of your client is very important for your working relationship. Now, what is important is to put up partnerships, protocols, and contacts, preferably on first name basis, with prosecutors specialized in human trafficking cases. How can this be set up? Through open meetings with partners regarding the topics such as confidentiality versus reporting obligation, and who should be on these meetings: specialized prosecutors, police working with youth, the municipal official serving on prostitution. For example, in Antwerp, there is a person working on prostitution itself. That's her full-time job. Those persons can really be a contribution. And also social workers who work in closed and secured settings for minors and who encounter these problems. Now, the knowledge of the environment and the world of prostitution is very important if you come across these clients. This can go through the forms. For example, we see that 18-year-olds often are working in brothels. Now, it's not that at 18 years old that a person decides to go work in a brothel. There's in their previous years, of course, some other things that made their decision go that way. You should know as a caregiver with these clients, what are the benefits of working in a brothel against working behind a window, or the benefits from working independently, the dangers of working in hotels, rooms, or motels, street prostitution, also know what is legal, what is not legal in your region, in your country, and as well, the benefits as the dangers should be addressed in communication. Shouldn't be only on the dangers, otherwise the client doesn't feel acknowledged. And the online part is definitely not to be neglected. There are ways such as OnlyFans is very popular since the corona. Telegram, it's an app where a lot of strange things going on, very difficult for prosecution or justice departments. Snapchat, Instagram, and definitely have knowledge of the national prostitution sites if they're legal in certain countries. Belgium, there's, for example, Red Lights and Quartier Rouge. And there should be a cooperation with them, at least some contact, so they can either report minors, and they can say if they doubt if something fishy is going on. Also, a guideline is important. There's a guideline: when is somebody being exploited? I talked about previous cases, not only prostitution, but also burglary or drugs dealing, scamming. Basically, when it's a general guideline, I'll clarify more, but if there's more than 50% of the profits going to another party, and somebody is being exploited, now you should take in care proportionality. 50% is a lot to give away, or 49%, but in a brothel, the sex worker, she also pays the owner a lot, basically almost 40% as a percentage, but that's not necessarily exploitation. She provides a clean, safe working environment. There's a bouncer at the door, but when the women buy a bottle of champagne, the profits are mostly for the madam working behind the bar. That's the aspect of proportionality. Is the person taking the money from the victim or the worker? What are they providing for them, and how free is that person to decide if they want to do something or not? That is something that it should be taken in mind. Now, another very good guidance for practitioners and very practical is the Rock and Water program. And we do have a next slide that goes on about it, but feel free to ask questions about it and ask for references for websites. There are local as well as international websites which offer the program. Now I will see how we can set the next part up. Yes.
Rock and Water is a physical.
Sorry.
Rock and Water is a physical resilience and social skills training. It's developed for youth to stand up for themselves or to learn how to control themselves. The training develops insight in social situations and makes the participants take time to reflect on their behavior. The training mimics certain everyday stressful situations and trains the participants how to act with self-control. The Rock aspect reflects on setting personal boundaries, independent decision-making, and following its own path. It's reacting and taking action in situations. The Water aspect reflects on communication, listening skills, solution finding, and respecting boundaries of others. It's the power of going with the flow and not reacting at all. We offer parts of this training specific to our target group in one-on-one settings. We assist our clientele in connecting with themselves, in discovering the power of their breath, and teaching them how to express their personal boundaries.
All right, let me put on the video back again. Yes, we are back. Now, as we mentioned before, feel free to ask questions and you can contact us either through our mail, through our phone number. There's also some very important information on our websites. It's available in English regarding guides and tools that you can use either in a social setting. To a lot of youth institutions use those tools to see if they should be worried. Now, let's be clear, these are not tools that if you have 6 of the 12 items that you have a victim, but it's something to keep in mind, to pay attention to of what's going on in group homes, for example. And for the rest, you can follow us also on our social pages here. So I will give the word back to Silvia Oriada, and I will follow further instructions if there are questions.
Q&A, I think.
Yes.
Stop a deal.
Stop a deal. Yes. I don't hear.
We cannot hear you, Silvia.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Steve and Audrey, for this comprehensive presentation. I see one first question coming in that I'm going to read out to you. What is your relationship with the police and prosecutors? Also, what is the role of social welfare center when they are involved in a case?
Law enforcement.
The second part I didn't understand. What is
The second part is the involvement of social welfare in a case. What is, I suppose they mean, what is, yes, what is their role?
All right. Now, as a first part of the questions, we do have cooperation, but we do of course protect our information and our clientele. For example, cooperation with the police, we are on a first name basis with specialized departments. For example, we often encounter minors. So we are residing in Antwerp, where a lot of clients come, but we go in all of Flanders, which a lot of police departments. So whenever we encounter clients in a certain place, we contact specifically the police officers working on youth. They know us, we know them, and if they don't know us, they are often very welcoming because we can, they respect our expertise. And the ones that do know us, they are very happy to talk about and think creatively on how to further approach a case. For example, if a client doesn't want to talk or doesn't want to file complaints or anything, police can still give advice on how to proceed. Sometimes they can, if a client is prepared, they can they provide an officer who can come to anywhere. Either we can go to the office of them, but they can also come to our office, or we can meet somewhere in a bar. They come in civilian clothes and they can talk with the client, give them some explanations, answer their questions without force, without interrogating them. And that is often very well received with the clients. Now, of course, we do have clients that it started when they were minor, but then they became adults. Then we can still contact the youth department, see if they know some more information about it. But we can talk with the prostitution team from the police department for the adults. They can offer the same thing. We think they can think creatively on how we can protect our confidentiality and how to motivate the client to either file reports or how to proceed. Each case is very differently. Sometimes the case is already going on and they just need a little bit more information. And if a client knows that, and then they feel safe, oh, I would like to share that piece of information, that's okay. Then the police can go on with the prosecutor. We also have contact with the prosecutors. That's very limited because we can ask them questions. It's very formal. They can ask us questions too. But also if there's something needed more in a case ongoing or that needs to start, they advise on that. And they're the experiences, they are very welcoming because they are often very frustrated of their work that they cannot proceed. We see clients mostly every week. They see a client once for an interrogation, often with a video recording and everything. And that's it. It's a very forced setting. So they're very happy that we can think creatively. The second part, the involvement of youth institutions. What we experience is youth judges, youth institutions are very much on top of things. So they are usually involved whenever there are problematic situations. There is already a youth judge or youth institutions involved, and we have very good relationships with them. We go there for either case discussions for a specific case or for a global introduction of what we do for our work. And we do notice that they also have a lot of questions regarding these topics because it's very delicate material, and often it's a world that caregivers, they don't know very well. That is why what we also say, the guidance for practitioners about the world of prostitution and drugs and teenagers, the importance of knowing the world.
Very good. Thank you. We do have one more question coming from our partner, Elena Muscarella, the LILA project manager from Accra, Milan. Elena's asking if you could provide more information about what you mean about with involving the family system. You mentioned involving the family system. What does it mean?
The involvement of family systems, it's important for the future of a client because the client often has been isolated, is very lonely. And of course, you can talk about setting up caregivers and a network, but there more often than not, there was a breach during growing up. There was a breach with the family, either through fights, either through disputes, false accusations, conflicts, drug use, frustration. And when there is the possibility, then it's important to, how do you say it, that they then there are a few years further, that there's a setup in place where the caregiver can provide healing possibilities, so that the client who is now older, maybe 19, 20, and not 16, 15 anymore, where they can talk about issues, make agreements, if she can go live back at home with certain new agreements. That is very useful, because often when they're adults, they are actually left in the dark. Where are they gonna stay? It's very limited possibilities for them. So family, when possible, it's important to follow those healing paths.
All right, thank you. We have one more from Georgia. Participant from Greece, if I'm not mistaken. What would you say are the biggest challenges when helping victims of trafficking or of gender-based violence? That's one question. And also, do you have any advice for someone who is new in the field of, I guess she means supporting, providing assistance to victims? Is there something in particular they should be paying attention to?
Well, the first part, if I remember, it was, could you repeat the first part? Sorry, Silvia.
Yes. What would you say are the biggest challenges in helping victims of human trafficking or gender-based violence?
First of all, is to after our conversations that we have, and we see aspects that they are victim of human trafficking. One of the biggest challenges is when they don't see it themselves. When they still believe they're doing it voluntarily, or they don't mind being exploited in our terms, in their gender, it's not exploitation, or if they like most of the part there, because they often have a lot of benefits also from residing in that world. There's a huge a huge dark place they go to if they separate themselves, and that comes with the second part of the problem, the fear. When they do notice that they are in an exploitation situation, especially when they get a little bit older, the fear becomes real.
It's all fun and games, and it's all exciting and parties and everything. And as long as they are further into the exploitation, they're too deep in and too scared to get out.
And we cannot offer them security, safety. We cannot promise them. We have a justice system where reports need to be made, the prosecution needs to do their job, and they still live in fear of repercussions. Not only also the fear of loneliness, of not being able to do whatever, but yeah, the repercussions are real and could be dangerous. And the second,
yes, the second part of the question, it was about what would be your advice for someone who's starting up in this field of supporting victims?
Yeah, well, it really depends on, is it starting out of college or starting as an adult on a different career path? Because if you're very young, for example, you could be 21 encountering a client of 21 as a caregiver. Those are also some challenges, but also if you're in social care work, social educational care work, and after 10 years, you're 30, 35 years old, and you started that path, it's you have immaturity with you. The specific challenges when you have approximately the same age, you can use that as a benefit, not to further divide the worlds, but to connect more, to see what other possibilities there are, to strengthen the client, be more of a role model and a support, because the benefit is they can really connect with a young person. But the danger there is that they see that their worlds are so far apart that they make a break out of it. Is like, this is not my world, and you have no idea where I come from or who I am or what I have experienced. So that's a challenge. And as a more mature or
Take your time.
especially take your time in the conversations and respect the client. Don't act all-knowing, because as an adult, when we become older, we do gain a lot of experience. We know and we see a lot of stuff, but you need to follow the client where they are now, because at that age, it is very normal that you think you know and understand the world as it is, no matter which worlds that you experienced, but you think that is reality. And if an adult comes to you and gives you other value-based ideas, it can also offer a breach where the client retracts and goes more on their own and say, no, this is not for me, because it's a very different world.
I think also like prepare yourself to get frustrated sometimes, because they like one day they're willing to talk to you, they want to do stuff, and then the next week you go back and they don't want to see you at all, they don't want anything to do with you. And like when you go up there and they say, no, I don't want to talk today, okay, see you next week, it's fine, I'm not going to force you to do anything. And they're not used to it when help or like social workers come up to us like, okay, you don't want to talk today, it's okay. No, they always go like, oh, my agenda is so full, blah, blah, blah. So I think when you do that, take your time, it's okay, I will come when you are ready. They really appreciate that. So,
Yeah.
That is.
That is, yes, I can see that there is what you were mentioning, Steve. This is something that often we say in Payoke, we meet the clients where they are, and go through the path together. And Audrey, that's also a very important point, the well-being of the service provider, of the counselor, because they accumulate a lot of stress in this job. Vicarious trauma is also at risk, so a lot of attention has to pay. You also had that, Steve, in your presentation in terms of avoiding overload for staff of working with victims. I have one more question here from Milen. She's asking, what about victims found in Brussels and Wallonia? What organizations can be contacted that works like you with Loverboy victims, other than Pagasa or Surya?
Well, Child Focus is a very important partner with us, and they are all over Belgium. So they have a very good view of what's going on in Wallonie, Brussels. We are only for part of Brussels and for Flanders. So Child Focus, I would say, as a surplus on Pagasa, Surya. And of course, depending on what you want, there are certain institutions that offer, for example, specialized residence for victims of human trafficking minors. They can also be contacted for information. Of course, I'm sure if you ask them, the right person will get in touch with you with a specific question or need. And it can go from a good place to search for, or especially if you're from a different country, psychiatric hospitals often are a last place to go to for victims. So they are often also in those settings, voluntary psychiatric hospitals. That's a very good place to contact.
I will just read a couple of more questions and then we'll take a break because I think that it could be interesting for everyone to know. Muriel is asking, what is your average caseload?
Mm-hmm. We try to have 8 cases and we try to see each case once a week. So if you ask how our workday looks like, of course, our clients don't come to us here in Antwerp in our office. We travel across Flanders. We take the train mostly. Sometimes we have our praatmobiel or talking bus, the talking van that Anton mentioned before. with a counseling room inside. So we are permanently mobile. Basically, that's what we try. Eight is actually the baseline. Sometimes, depending on if you're vacation or parental leave, it's going to be 5 to 8, but
sometimes more if you still need to close some down. Or
and to further clarifying that basically means that you can get 2 clients in one day. For example, if I need to go to Limburg, to Hasselt, I see one in the morning, for example, 10, 11 o'clock, conversation is about an hour. Then I have time to go to the next meeting in the afternoon, somewhere, hopefully in the area. We try to organize it that the clients are not all across Belgium. We try to keep them a bit close with our caseload.
Okay. There's another participant asking about, and I know you will have much to say on this, is about the transition from being a minor, which means being protected by special legislation, being in the youth system, receiving services, certain services, to becoming an adult. How do you face, she's asking, how do you face the situation? Are there special programs to support people as they come of age?
I think almost every organization offers like until 21, and you have others organization that go to 25.
Yes.
But it's up to the person itself to choose if they still take the opportunity to stay and get help of the organization.
It becomes voluntarily after 18. The youth church doesn't have anything to say anymore in 95% of the cases. That means if they decide to stop, go to their own environment, and they often, starting 60 years, are already dreaming about that. Once I'm 18, I do whatever I want. That is the major challenge. There are situations in place that can be helpful, but it's voluntary. And that's also a difficult part. But to make it forced, I don't know if it's gonna help. I think voluntary is a very important part.
But at Payoke, they are welcome at all ages.
Yes. And we do notice that the older they get, the more of a psychosocial role we take, because under 18, they are often in institutions, and that's more for the institutions, their departments. But once they're 18, then they can count on us to keep on talking and to keep on seeing individual cases, what they need.
Now, next question is quite interesting. Mihaela is coming with a case to you. Any tips for changing consciousness and motivation? As a high school counselor, I have a specific case right now. One of the best students, 18 years old, from a broken family, is choosing voluntarily to start making money from sex work. Mm-hmm. Her typical attitude is that we're all stupid to fight against her natural call. She wants to make easy money. Do you have any tips for changing her mind and drive?
For example,
she's 18.
She's 18, right? So we have, for example, we are lucky that we have a great organization here in Antwerp that we can go to for advice. We have Violet, which is a partner. They offer professional advice for people who choosing to go work as a sex worker or who decide to quit as a sex worker. They have healthcare, they offer clear view on the benefits, on the dangers. But if they have probably, I'm sure on the website they have a lot of information, but the general idea is not to judge the lady in her decision or the guy who's going into sex work, because we have Boys Project also, which is more on for men trying to do sex work. Not to judge, but talk with those organizations to educate yourself so you can use that information with the client. The client won't feel judged if you talk with them about the worlds of prostitution. That's what I've mentioned in the guidelines also. Talk about all the work forms, either online, offline, about the benefits, the profits that can be made. There's a lot of money to be made, that's for sure. We shouldn't ignore that. but there are also some dangers.
What country was it?
Mihaela, I think it's Eastern Europe. Could be Romania.
Is it legal there or not?
Sorry, say it again.
Legal there to work as a sex worker? So I think that's a big point. Like in Belgium, when you're an adult, it's legal to be a sex worker. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to follow a lot of rules. And like often when we have someone turning 18, it's like, yeah, I want to keep on doing this, and we tell them, okay, you can do it, but you have to do it legally, and you have to do this and this. And it's like, oh, it's not that easy anymore. And they don't like it. It becomes a real job, and the fantasy about it is gone, and it's hard work, it's not nice hours, and they just don't like it anymore. So, but I don't know if it's legal there. So
yeah, and even if it's illegal, it doesn't gonna change the fact that she decides to do it. She's gonna do it, especially when she's already 18. There's not much more you can do than to offer support. Not that you should insist that she's gonna do the job, but to offer a clear view. What can you make? Of course, there are benefits. What are the pitfalls? There's a lot of drugs involved for the work. There's the workload. What are you going to do when you fall sick? When you're pregnant? When you have periods? So those are a lot of things that can be used to talk about with the client, where she will feel respected in her choice. But it's just not to demotivate her, just to offer a broader view on the world that she decides on going into anyway.
Yeah. So what I pick up here is a non-judgmental attitude is key. Then, of course, you have to adjust to what is the legislation, the situation in the country. Mihaela, she confirms she's from Romania, and that prostitution is illegal in Romania. So perhaps this is a question we can pick up with Silvia later on, Silvia Tabusca. Now, let me see, this is also interesting, coming from Muriel. Do you see victims that are also perpetrators?
Yes. That doesn't mean that they're not victims anymore, of course. But it's a delicate situation. So we offer them, of course, our basic assistance and advice, but it's not for them, especially, it's not always very clear when they become a perpetrator. To give a simple example, when a victim lives her life, she goes in the weekend with some guys, and she takes a friend of her with them to the hotel room or to a room. She'll probably know that rape is going to be taking place, or she's going to be given drugs and there's going to be rape. But in their mind, it's not like I'm committing a felony here. There's a rational thought process going on where they can always say to the other victim, yeah, well, it was her choice. I didn't force her to take her with me. I didn't force her to take drugs. So the rationalization process is not to be neglected with the perpetrators. They are blinded very often. Doesn't excuse the fact, of course. But to be clear, the prosecutor and the judge also see it that way. They clearly state it doesn't mean that if you're an offender, that the victim part is not going to be looked at. You can be and a victim and a perpetrator, and it's not that you skip over from one statute to another, or you're not a victim anymore. No, you can still be a victim, but it's something that happens very often, and often in blurred lines. Often it's very clear also. Sometimes it's a very formal process when they say, okay, it's a really bad intention then, really malicious. We also see that, but most of the cases, it's more blurred.
Okay, we have another question from Christina from the Danish Center Against Human Trafficking. Do you have any advice concerning victims who have cognitive disabilities? I have a case where the traffickers was recruiting young women with different cognitive challenges.
Yeah. What kind of cognitive stoornissen? And she was when becoming an adult, what happens sometimes, there's a, I don't know, let me think about how to call it in English, but there's a way that a judge can take away decision making of an adult if there are cognitive challenges, really mental disability in place, which basically means that they cannot sign a contract. For example, 18, 19 years old decides to go work in a brothel. She cannot sign that contract. She cannot work there. So that means that even anonymously, an organization can send social inspection. They see if everything is all right, but then they see with that person that she is not allowed to sign that contract. A caregiver should have signed that. Then it's punishable, even if it's a legal process. Now with minors, that is very difficult. It's not our departments working with people with mental disorders. So I'm sure that if you contact the organizations who are specialized in that, working with cognitive disabilities, and specifically which ones, because depends on, for example, autism we offer encounter. It's a very different approach than somebody who has behavioral disorders, or depending on which it's a different approach. It's very difficult to give a clear answer on a general case like this. It was in an ideal situation, we would go to the organization and we would talk about, we would prepare the case, we would go to the organization, talk about and reflect and brainstorm together on what's possible. But maybe we can go to Denmark?
We can do it online.
Yeah.
If you want to, we can meet them online.
Yeah, if we get permission of Anton. It's a little bit out of our jurisdiction, but I don't mind.
Thank you. We have one question from Kazem, from our partner organization, Diotima. She is a community interpreter. She's asking, oops, sorry. Now. She's asking, I worked with unaccompanied minors. I work with unaccompanied minors, and especially boys who prostitute themselves or to get paid or receive a service benefit. My question is, what should I do as a community interpreter if the victim, who's from my country and culture, wants to open up with me and not with his social worker?
Well,
that's a tricky one.
Well, it's difficult, but what we offer encounter. It's also in group homes, you offer encounters that a client takes hold of somebody as a trust person. I think that's the difficult part. First of all, you could try to motivate them what the benefits are of talking with an extra person about it, because once they already started talking with you, it's already out of yeah, and that's good. And they see, okay, that person is not judging me. I feel comfortable. And if that person can install another person where she can talk about, and could be a therapist, could be a doctor, could be the individual counselor in a group home or wherever the person resides. If it's one more person involved, then the door is open. But also checking why doesn't that person want to share it with other people? It could be for different reasons, but if you know why, then you can also adapt to the why of that person.
Because you don't want to carry the load alone, and you give the client a person to choose to tell it to, like maybe not the counselor or anything, but like you have to pick another adult you trust to also give this message to, so you don't have to do it alone.
And also keep in mind, depending on country, depending on regulations, sometimes you just have to say it. If there's a criminal facts going on, you have an obligation to report. We do encounter that. The most important thing that we do, we talk with our client, we talk about our obligation to report, also in the first meeting that we have with them. And then we try and talk, what can we say? We have to say something, but how can we formulate a story that it's okay for you, that we can report it either through authorities or somebody else in an organization. And from there, you can go further. But small steps. But not doing anything is not really an option. Just sitting and getting it in, because burnout is the next part. Because you keep it in yourself and you're going to fall out. Then you're not going to do the job very long after a few years.
A practical question. How do you stay in contact with the girls after the intake phase? Like by phone, or do you have a hotline they can contact, a green line they can contact? How do you manage the privacy aspects with minors?
We have a work phone, and I usually work through WhatsApp if I have direct contact with the girls.
Snapchat,
yeah. But I usually, when I go see the girls in institutions or the schools, I contact the school or institution, but I always tell the girl, I make the meeting with her, when and what time, and then I tell it to the person who organized the facility or room. But when they're mostly adults, then we have direct contact through any means that we as regular people in society have. Snapchat, WhatsApp, text messaging,
calling.
Yeah. We do have, but I don't use it. We do have a Facebook account and an Instagram account for work, but I only use my private, but I don't share it with the clients. But they don't really ask for it either. I don't ask for theirs. So it's WhatsApp and text messaging.
What works for the clients?
Yeah. Sometimes it was email.
Yeah.
Really
if they don't have a phone,
yeah,
you get creative.
But we stimulate direct contact.
Okay.
Not through the organization or a hierarchical system.
Right. I'm going to read out the last question, and then if there is more coming up, I will let you guys just answer in writing. What happens to victims who are not eligible to benefit from your assistance, to whom they are referred?
What happens to victims who are not eligible? Well, every victim is eligible to our system, but when they fall out, it's usually because they themselves decide on not following up on our conversations or help that we can provide. But when do they fall out? Whenever a person is not a victim of human trafficking, because we do encounter a lot of abuse, a lot of rape. That is the moment that we give in our assessment an advice on where to go to, what kind of organizations can you contact, what are the possibilities. Out of our experience, what works, what does not work. Sometimes we do set some stuff up, depending if they're in an institution, it's more the institution that's going to do it for them. If they're not in an institution, we're gonna offer help in setting things up. But it's all voluntarily. All our work, nothing is forced. It can't be forced. All
right. Okay, so I would say let's break here. We're 5 minutes beyond schedule. So Silvia, if that's okay with you, we'll come back from the coffee break at 10:35. Yes? Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Audrey. That was wonderful. And we'll see you back, everyone, in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks.